Well, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Cover to Cover. My name is Carl. I'm one of the pastors for Antioch Christian Church. Joined once again by my good friend Jason Southward, our overall youth and children's champion. Just pretty much runs the whole ministry department. Something like that. Anything to do with kids and youth. So thanks for tuning in for us. We've got kind of a big stretch of scripture to talk about today in the book of Exodus. We're going to be kind of Exodus 18 to 21-ish to start this out, and we're kind of like the umbrella of, if you will, just as a theme, is we're going to be dealing, yes, with the commandments, because we get the introduction of the 10 commandments in Exodus 19. So we'll be dealing with that, but a big part of this is dealing with the holiness of God. Yeah. And so probably not going to be able to unpack every single commandment, one by one, if you will, but I think we can get a good overlay of that and how it relates to this holiness of God, who he is, and how that's still applicable to our life, even though, yes, we obviously read the 10 commandments in the Old Testament, and we're now living in the New Testament, New Covenant era. Yeah. But before we get to that, I think you had some interesting points from chapter 18 when Moses gets a visit from his father-in-law named Jethro.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really interesting portion to me. I see a couple different things that I pulled out from it. The first thing is just like the conversation of Moses and Jethro. Moses is having this conversation, but even before that, it says that Jethro had heard about what the Lord had done when he brought Israel out of Egypt. And that's one of the reasons that he came to talk to Moses. And so in that conversation, Moses is explaining to him all of the ways that God has just brought them out of. They just had the battle with the Amalekites, and they defeated the Amalekites, and like all the ways that God is moving in the life of Israel. And it says in verse 9, it says that Jethro was delighted to hear about all the good things the Lord had done for Israel in rescuing them from the hand of the Egyptians. He said, "Praise be to the Lord who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods, for he did this to those who treated Israel arrogantly." And it really got me thinking about like, how often am I even sharing like what God is doing in my own life as a believer? How often am I sharing with other people, and how much more could I be blessing other people by sharing the faithfulness of God in my own life? And so like we kind of sit with our stories sometimes because we're nervous to share. Like maybe we're in just different situations and aren't necessarily like Christ followers or whatever it is, and we're scared to share. But like, man, the power of a testimony of what God has done, you get to see some of that played out in that story in general. And then he keeps going, and as he gets into more of the conversation with Moses, he sees the leadership burden on Moses. He sees that Moses is literally sitting there trying to be the judge of all of Israel. So every day he just sits there, and people are just lined up, and he has to be like, all right, I got to judge what's right, what's wrong, what's right, what's wrong. And so all day long, and Jethro's like, Moses, like, you cannot carry this by yourself. Like there is too much in here for you to have to handle by yourself. And I mean, as we see so many times, like when people put a burden, and we feel a responsibility a lot, right? To like, we feel the weight of responsibility. Like, I'm the only one who can do this, or it's only going to get done right if I do it, right? And so like, I think there's a lot of that in Moses probably. But for him to receive what Jethro said and be like, oh yeah, this probably isn't healthy for me, I think it's a really cool thing. And I think you had something to share along those lines as well.
Yeah. I mean, to get into that, like what's an interesting flip is, we go at the beginning of Exodus when God's calling Moses to do all these things. I want you to get my people out of Egypt, and Moses just floods God with all these excuses. I can't do it. I don't speak well. I need someone to help me. Send someone else. But now all of a sudden, for whatever reason, Moses is kind of in the middle of the doldrums of ministry. He's seen the big things happen. We've parted the Red Sea. All these things have kind of transpired. We've seen the massive miracles of God and how he got them there. So that's kind of the big fun stuff. Now he's in the doldrums of ministry and just trying to work with these people who just still at times don't seem to get it. And so he's just day to day trying to settle disputes, literally acting by himself.
Yeah.
Which is an irony to me, because again, at the beginning he's like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I need help. And now all of a sudden he's doing it by himself. And so what I like, just before I kind of piggyback with that, I really appreciated your point about the idea of people watching for our testimony. I think we sell ourselves short in what we can do to encourage other people by what God has done in our life. Even admitting different mistakes, like, oh man, I had a really difficult time following God in this season. I felt like Moses, where I'm like, send somebody else. I can't do it. But then maybe I finally acquiesced, God gets a hold of me and I say yes and I do it. And then God moves mightily. Man, we need to be sharing that. It's not an arrogance piece. It's not like, oh, look at me, I'm all that. No, it's a way to share that how even you and I in ministry have those ups and downs where God moves or maybe doesn't feel like he's moving in our lives. But then when something finally clicks, man, and it moves forward, we can encourage people with that. And I think that's a really important point. And what I loved about the idea that that Jethro has seen all this, and now because of this testimony and seeing what God has done and done through Moses, I think it's a neat full circle moment for Moses because, again, the idea that people are always watching, they really are.
Yeah.
And I made this point early on in the podcast when we kind of started things out, when Moses made that grave error in killing the Egyptian. He looks one way, he looks the other way, doesn't think anybody's watching, but we find out another sentence later that people did see what he did.
Right.
People are always watching on the negative side, but this affirms that people are always watching on the positive side as well. And many times it's what's God doing through our life becomes encouraging to somebody else. So I think it's really good that you bring that point out.
Yeah, and I also think as you get again back into that conversation with Jethro and Moses on him like attempting just to carry so much weight.
Yeah.
Like I think that we have to like talk about like when that happens, even in our personal life, like we see it happen in the public a lot, right? When people are trying to do too much, carry too much, we all of a sudden watch these moral failures start to happen.
Good point.
When they're isolated on an island. And they're trying to do all these things by yourself. Time after time after time, we see this happen.
Yeah.
But like it happens to us too. Like it happens to us in our personal things when we feel like we have to be present at everything, when we have to be doing everything, when everything's on us.
Yeah. There
is no way that we can be in a healthy place and be trying to do everything by ourselves.
Right.
And so I just think that, that's one of the things that really stuck out in there, in that. And so I almost find it like as a really big encouragement that for Jethro to be like, Moses, hey, like you can actually delegate some of these things. And what he said was really important. He says like, teach them the ways and then let them go. And so like, you're going to feel more comfortable. And so sometimes we don't want to teach people because like, it's going to take too much time to teach them. Well, at the end of the day,
I'll just do it myself. I'm
going to do it myself. Right. But at the end of the day, like we do know that if we teach people, the long-term benefit is great. And so like, we do need to work on that sometimes, I think.
There's an old quote by author pastor John Maxwell, the kind of leadership guru. And he said, you can do a lot of ministry and you can do a lot of things by yourself, but it's not as much fun as when you work through other people. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it, and yes, it takes time to work through other people. Yes, it sometimes slows things down as you're growing other leaders, but ultimately it's more fun.
Yeah.
More people get to be involved. More people kind of get in the game of ministry, if you will, and you watch them flourish because God may do some amazing things through them because of their giftings and their abilities that he can't do through you. And again, even at Moses at this stage of his life, he's powerful, he's done all these things, but I really appreciate his humility and his willingness to submit to his father-in-law, and say, yep, you know what, Dad? Yeah, you're right on. You might be right on this one.
Kids, you hear that?
Exactly. Because we far too often, and I'm guilty of it, we think it's all on our shoulders. But man, what a blessing it is to be able to delegate and to see some other people succeed and take over and keep going.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Good point, man. So, all right, that kind of gets us through 18. Any other things you want to bring out in 18?
No, I think that was the majority of where I was going. Maybe just the other thing, like, and we kind of already said it, but like the fact of being in leadership, like, if you were in any place of leadership, like you should be equipping other people to do things. And like for us, like we should feel blessed by giving other people opportunities to do things, to step into different places and things like that. And so that's just a continuation, I guess, of what we've already talked about. But yeah, it was definitely something that I had wrote down. I'm like, oh man, like as a leader, am I equipping the people underneath me to actually?
Because eventually we're not going to be here.
Correct.
And if we've done a poor job of equipping people underneath us or God has brought alongside of us, that's on us.
Yeah.
And so it's important to raise them up. And actually what's fun is watching them succeed. Who cares who gets the credit? God ultimately needs the credit. He deserves the credit. But man, it's so much more fun to watch somebody kind of just catch that fire. Oh my gosh, this God thing works, and then you watch them take off.
This God thing
works, and that's a gift, right? We work with kids, we work with youth, and then you
100%.
see them catch fire, and again they have these moments of, oh my gosh, it actually it did work.
Those guys aren't idiots after all.
They're not as dumb. They're not as dumb as they look.
I love it. I love it.
Cool. All right. Well, now we're gonna get some heavy hitting stuff because we're gonna get into the 10 Commandments. Ooh, the big laws and things like that.
Yes.
But I don't think it's necessarily as complicated as people make it out to be. But I think this overarching idea, it really brings out the holiness of God and why these are so important. Because again, I can't follow these 10 Commandments perfectly, and even in the New Testament talks about you screw up one, you've screwed them all up,
right?
But there's an important lesson to learn about the holiness of God and why He kind of sets this out there. But you and I were talking pre-podcast. You had some really interesting ideas about how God graciously moves in their life before we even get to this idea of giving them the law. Why don't you kind of expound on that?
Yeah, so like even at the beginning of chapter 19, he reminds them of what he's done, what he's brought them out of. He's raised them up on eagle's wings, like he's taken them out of that. And so even before he asks for their complete obedience to the law he's about to give, like you see the gracious aspect of God delivering the people, right? And so like I think it's a really cool concept that like God reminds us of His grace before He even calls us to His command, like to live for Him and all of that. And I think that's true of all of us. Like we experience the grace of God, and it's because of the grace of God that we choose to follow and be obedient. And I think some people flip that around. Like I get that kind of mixed up.
God's not going to love me unless I obey Him.
Unless
God's not going to
perfect. Yep. All of these things, like we get it so messed up in there. But it's that whole thing of like God chose us while we were sinners. Like He came and died for us while we were sinners. Yeah. Like in the midst.
He didn't say get yourself
sin.
Cleaned up first, then I'll present to you Jesus.
Yes, exactly. And so I just think it's just a big thing. And God, again, it's something that people miss in the Old Testament is like God's grace is all throughout the Old Testament. Right. But we sometimes see the judgment and the holy and all these things.
Oh, God's a big meanie in the Old Testament.
All of the rest of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and because He reminds them, right? You yourselves have seen what I did. Don't forget this. And so this idea, there's this grace ahead of it, I think is a very valuable thing to understand. Because if we kind of contextualize this, again, how many people think, I'm so far from God, I didn't grow up in church, or I've given God the Heisman, the stiff arm, and I just have walked away from Him. He's not going to care about me anymore. No, God is always pursuing us, and He acts on our behalf way more than we even think He does. And sometimes it's not till retrospect, we're like, that's where God showed up. That's what God was doing in my life. So this idea of grace ahead of that, I think is valuable because, again, I think there's a lot of people think they've screwed up far too much for God to ever care or move in their life. But He is always trying to draw us back to Himself. And, the idea that grace is very prevalent in the Old Testament is absolutely true. God saves by grace, whether it's the Old Testament or New Testament. Before we even get to Jesus. Yeah. But I think that's a really valuable thing. And so I love the word picture. I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. More than just I brought you out of slavery. Yeah. I'm bringing you to myself, a loving, caring, protecting God. But then He does flip. Now it's this if-then statement. If you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, don't forget that, it's mine, I made it, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Man, and that's strong, because this idea of obey me fully, well, again, is that a mean God? Are we supposed to just obey like robots?
Right.
But if you think about it, God is a holy God, we are not. And if we're to be in His presence, that's a conundrum. Yeah. But the thing I always talk about, I preach a lot, is God as our creator, God as the sustainer of all things. He has a right to set out what He wants for whether it's obedience and for our relationship with Him. And God doesn't grade on a curve.
Yeah.
We in culture, we like the idea of this 90% rule. I've preached this before. Like, man, we really like it when, if my kid comes home and gets a 90% on their tests, I'm a proud dad. Way to go.
Sure.
So the idea, like, we really don't need to be 100% all in for God, right? We don't really 100% be all in, but God has the right to dictate what our obedience levels should be. But the thing is, even though you and I cannot fulfill that, that's where the grace comes back in, which will ultimately point us to Christ. Yeah. Because again, even the Israelites could not follow all 10 commandments perfectly. Correct. Right? And you and I cannot do that. But now, even flipping to the New Testament, this language of being a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, that gets us to 1 Peter, where we understand that because of Christ, he takes that for us. We can now stand in front of a holy God because we have God's grace through Jesus' blood covering us. So even if we do screw up the 10 commandments, even though we do screw things up, we, in a sense, can obey fully because of what Christ has done for us and our relationship with him.
Yeah.
So I know that's a little bit of a jump ahead, if you will.
No, that's okay.
But I think that kind of wraps up, because again, I don't want us to get to settle into, 90% is good enough. Well, God's God, and He has the right to demand, what percentage that really is, and He wants us all in.
Yeah. And I think that there's a balance of things in that, of like, that God's presence in our life requires both a reverence of Him and an obedience of Him. And I think that we see that in here. And I think that we can hear that and not hear a relational God. But I think He's also very relational in this. Like, He is actually talking to Moses and Aaron. He wants the people. He said, bring them to me. Like, I want to be in relationship with my people. Right. And so, like, I see sometimes that we get some of these things, we forget in the culture that we live in today, like, that we think of it only relationally at times and be like, we're just supposed to chill with God. Right. And we lose sight of the other part of this reverence and of this obedience and this holiness that we're called to in that. And it's just like the contrast of the culture now versus this culture who is terrified. Right.
Yeah.
Literally says they're terrified. Like, now don't make us go up there. Don't make us do this. Yeah. Like, they see the power and the awe of God in there. And so it's just a very interesting thing. And I think that it eventually, I think we will have to get back to a place of reverence in our own lives and in the life, in the life of the church at some level. So.
No, and you bring up a good point. Again, God is not just, asking for obedience or demanding obedience just for the sake of that. Again, for us to be robots. He wants us to be holy and pure and to be this kingdom of priests because He ultimately wants a relationship with us. He didn't create us to just kind of send us off into the earth and just kind of watch us from a distance and laugh at all our screw-ups. He created us to be in fellowship with Him.
Can you fellowship with each other. For just a second, like, just imagine Him looking at me and like, what are they doing?
Well, my gosh, every single day. Carl, you're an idiot. What are you doing? But the fact, again, this obedience thing is, it's to create a relationship with us. Yeah. Because He wants to be close to us. But since we screw things up and we're sinful, something has to happen, for us to be back in that right relationship with Him, which again is why this Old Testament ultimately points to the New Testament in the idea of Jesus, because Jesus provides that way for us to be restored back to God. Yeah. Kind of a thing. But again, He shows up in a powerful way. He's magnificent, He's powerful, but we see He's not to be trifled with.
Yeah.
So let me blow through these commandments just as a refresher. Some of you may be familiar with this. I'll just kind of do a quick summary. But when we get into the beginning of Exodus chapter 20, right, verse 3, you shall have no other gods before me. It should be familiar. Verse 4, you shall not make for yourself an idol. Verse 7, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Verse 8, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. Exodus 20, verse 12, honor your father and mother. Verse 13, you shall not murder. Verse 14, you shall not commit adultery. Exodus 20, 15, you shall not steal. Verse 16, you shall not give false testimony. And verse 17, you shall not covet. Now, again, that's a summary, but that's the basic idea of what we're getting at. There's the 10 all laid out for us, kind of a thing. So, can you pick back up, at least mine, I don't know where you want to pick back up. My next notes are in verse 18. Again, trembling with fear, the awe and the mightiness of God. But what do you have for us in that part? Or even with the commandments?
Yeah, I think again, like we're jumping into this like the holiness conversation. Yeah. Like the fact that they literally trembled with fear because they've witnessed the power of God in all of these things. They have seen what it looks like when somebody opposes God. They've seen all of these things, and so they are walking in fear and trembling at some sense. And and then God is like saying, hey, listen, I'm going to give you some stuff. Like, I want you guys to look at this, to obey these things, to help you walk in the holiness that I've called you to. And so, he starts off with the stuff that points back to, like, you shall have no other gods before me. Like, I shall be your main priority. And honestly, I think we should go back in our culture right now and be like, hey, guys, do you hear this? Like, this is still real today. Like, we shall have no other gods before him. Nothing should be put as a priority ahead of God in any order. That's why he starts off the 10 Commandments with that one in particular. And then the no idols, the honor the name of God. How often do we misuse the name of God?
Oh my goodness, daily.
I mean, it's like sometimes it just comes so naturally to us, and that's a sad thing to think about, like how naturally it comes to us to misuse the name of God. And even like, the fourth, like, remembering the Sabbath, like, that one I think is one that we could do a whole episode on.
Oh, no
right?
question.
Like,
no
probably
question.
multiple episodes on it at this point. I think it's a conversation I find myself in more than any other conversation right now, is this thing of rest. And where do we rest, and how do we rest, and why don't we rest? And
there's always more to do. Produce heavy culture. Got to do this. Got to attain that. We're all
and
there's
there's one like quote that I was reading, is that, like, we have to trust God enough to slow down.
Great quote.
So many times I think that we, like, feel like, again, almost back to Moses in the beginning of this, we feel like we have to do everything. We feel like we have to have our kids in everything. We have to be at every sporting event. We can't miss a single game. We have 5 kids playing 5 sports at 5 different times, but we have to somehow be in 5 places at once, or we're failing them, right? Like, that's the type of, like, life that we pursue and we live, and we think that we're failures if we don't. But, like, God's just saying, hey, guys, just slow down. Like, slow down and trust me. I promise it's not going to be bad. Like, if we do this, all right? And so, I mean, that's just the first 4, and that's some of the stuff that sticks out in there.
And it's kind of neat. There's an old preaching analogy, like God's relation. Yes, God is holy and all of this, and so, like, these first, like, 4 commandments kind of are the vertical, us and God, right? No idols. You're number 1, and then we get the horizontal. Honor your father and mother. Don't commit adultery. That's relational. So it kind of has this neat shape of a cross. It's just kind of a fun analogy, if you will. It's kind of a great preacher thing. But I don't want to, like, get away from the importance of all the commandments. But man, just even in my life, just the idea of commandment 1, no other gods before me. If we got that one right, think about how much easier the other 9 would kind of fall into place. If all my decisions
almost like he knew what he was doing.
Almost like he knew what he was doing when he did that. Funny how that works. But man, if I ran so much more of my life through that filter of that template of nothing is above God, so many of the other things would fall into place. And again, but I'm human, you're human, we make these mistakes. And the beautiful thing is, even though God knew we couldn't keep up, it's still important to have that holy structure in place, because the commandments are more than just, hey, obey this. It's actually showing us where we're in error, and it reveals to us why we need him, because we can't do this by ourselves. Again, in a culture where we're, the self-made person is the one that seems to be so honored, and in God's world, it's the one that's dependent on him is that, and it ends up receiving more honor, and recognizes in humility, I can't do it without him. So these commandments, more than just saying, hey, because I used to think as a kid, well, if I just follow the 10 commandments, I'll go to heaven. Well, it's impossible, because we can't. We're fallible human beings. But they reveal to us where we're in error. They reveal to us where we're crooked, kind of like the ruler principle. The ruler actually shows us where our line is off, and this reveals to us how much we need him. And so, again, we could spend episode after episode in just the commandments alone. But just as a kind of a taste of things, again, not to again erase the other 9, but man, how many things would fall into place if we just kept the God piece number 1. So, any last parting thoughts before we got to wrap this thing up in chapter 20?
I mean, honestly, just like it's similar to what you said. Like, we see all this as, like, the ruler and where we're off and all of that, but, like, we also recognize the ultimate plan that God had in this as well. Like, knowing that this was not something that we were going to be able to live up to, but he already had it planned out ahead. Like, he knew that we were not going to be able to live up to this. He knew that we were going to have to do things. He offered the different sacrifices at one point, and then ultimately, like, so much of this points to the person of Jesus coming, and what that means for us, and how we get to live in relationship to him because of that. And so like I just like every time I get into this stuff, I'm always like try to be reminded of like how much of it points to Jesus.
Right. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to stand before a holy God, we have to be holy. Because if we are not, it doesn't work. Because a holy God and a sinful person cannot, in a sense, coexist.
Right.
So the ultimate solution, and why we talked about the kingdom of priesthood, that language that we see in 1 Peter, it ultimately points us to Christ. Because when we are in Christ, we have his righteousness imparted to us, and ultimately we get to stand before a holy God, even though we screw things up.
Yep.
It's all on Jesus. Well, I appreciate your insight, man. So thank you for this, for your time. And again, hopefully this was beneficial for you. If you have questions, feel free to send messages into the comment section. But other than that, know that we care for you as a church. We love you. And get out there, love God, love people, and make disciples.